All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our kickoff of the Rodham Impact Speaker Series. It's August. As you probably heard, I was talking about how this summer, it just seemed like it flew by. The weather, it was hot, then it was rainy. Oh my goodness, this California girl cannot get used to this East Coast DC weather. But you know something? We are here today to discuss National Immunization Month and what you can do and your little ones can do to make sure that you are immunized. Yes, indeed. We have a jam-packed conversation, and we have some awesome panelists here, esteemed panelists. So let me first introduce myself. I'm Ashanti Carter, and I serve as the program manager of the Rodham Institute that is housed at GW School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Hey, raise high. Joining me, we have Dr. Damico Walker, the Honorable Zachary Parker from the Ward 5 State Board Office of Education, and the lovely and very intelligent and powerful Dr. Yolandra Hancock. So let's jump into the conversation, shall we? So, panelists, I want each of you to introduce yourselves and just tell us what your organization does. So I'll start with you, Dr. Walker.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so excited to be here with you all this evening. So again, my name is Dr. Damico Walker. I am a pharmacist. I work for Walgreens. I'm actually a pharmacy manager. I will be transitioning actually next week or week after next to specialty pharmacy. So I'm very excited about that. But I also am the chair of Immunize DC. So it is a coalition here in the district. The vision of the coalition is a new generation of healthy and informed DC families, fully protected from vaccine preventable diseases across the lifespan. So really the work of our coalition is to partner with different organizations, from schools to pharma to pharmacies, doctors, and everything in between, to see how we can all partner together here in the district to make sure our children and adults are vaccinated against diseases that have vaccines that can prevent them. So our work is really diverse. We do different trainings, but the fun thing is platforms like this where we get to come on and make sure that we get to talk with the community and really just do our part to educate and empower everyone to stay vaccinated. So I'm extremely excited to be here this evening. I look forward to this engaging conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. I'm going to pass it to you, Mr. Parker.
Hi, everybody. I am Zachary Parker. I represent Ward 5, which is an area within DC on the DC State Board of Education, the district's only duly elected educational body. The state board oversees educational policies and regulations, everything from learning standards, attendance policies, graduation requirements, parental engagement standards, and so much more. And as you may imagine, the beginning of the school year, making sure we get as many of our students in school and immunized is very important. And just given the rise of monkeypox, given the consistent or the repeated harm of COVID-19, as well as all of the many other illnesses and flu viruses that are out there, this is something that is really top of mind. Right now, we're focused heavily on just informing parents in the district of our no shots, no school policy, which is essentially an expectation that if students are not up to date on all of their shots, they will not be able to stay in school. And so we want to make sure we get the word out so that as many parents as possible can take advantage of the free and numerous resources around the district to make sure students have their shots for the school year. So really looking forward to this conversation and adding and learning. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Hancock.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I had to slide in at the last minute. I was performing my most important job, and that's of mommy. I had a 15-minute window between my daughter's karate class and being on camera to go pick her up. So forgive me for that. My most important job is that of mother. I have a 9, almost 10-year-old daughter, And after that, I am a pediatrician and have been a pediatrician now for nearly 20 years. This is my 20th year anniversary of graduating from medical school. I'm class of 2002. Go Bruins. My other hats, thank you guys. My other hats are that I'm an obesity medicine specialist for both adults and for kids. And then my other hat, I wear lots, is that I work in public health. I'm a public health expert, really talking through public health issues, particularly in the health disparity space and in the maternal and child health space. I'm right now sitting in my pediatric practice in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, shout out Prince George's County, where I am working very hard during my birthday week to make sure babies get their back to school physicals and get their shots. So much so that I have actually been administering vaccines myself because our nurses were either dealing with their own children having some COVID issues or trying to live their best lives before they go back as school nurses. And so that's where I am. I love the fact that I'm here yet again with the stylish Dr. Walker. She's always killing it. Every panel I'm on with her, I'm like, sis, look at the matte burgundy lip. Yes, yes, yes. And then my brother, I'm loving the fact that we have male representation on this panel. So let's get into it.
All right, I love it. See, this is the kind of energy that we just love here. So, Dr. Walker, just give the people an overview. What are vaccines and how do they work?
Absolutely. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit before we talk about what vaccines are to kind of help understand a little bit more. First, let's talk about how our body just normally fights off an illness, right? So building an immune response. So basically, when we have a germ that enters into our body, be it a virus, be it a bacteria, it invades our body, it starts to multiply, starts to attack, and that's what causes an illness, which can lead to a disease. So our bodies are so smart that whenever we see a foreign body, we begin to activate our white blood cells to help to fight off the infection. So we have macrophages, B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes. These are just different type of white blood cells in our bodies that have different functions in order to fight off these infections. So our B lymphocytes, which are our defense white blood cells, they produce antibodies to help fight off the infection. So when we have these foreign bodies, the macrophages start to break them down, they form antigens, and our body recognizes, hey, that's not supposed to be there. So the B lymphocytes form these antibodies so that they can attack them, fight them off. And then we have our T lymphocytes. They're the ones that don't want to let go. They're like, oh, I remember y'all. You're not going to come in my body anymore. And so those T lymphocytes are what recognizes, hey, if this germ comes back in our body, we know to be on guard, to fight, to go into attack mode. So our bodies are wonderful machines that they can do this by themselves. However, our bodies also need help to produce a stronger immune response to fight off certain diseases. So that's why we have vaccines. So that's what brings us there. So basically the vaccines, they're just there to help teach our body, teach our immune system how to recognize and defend against any type of harmful germs that enter into our body. So there are different types of vaccinations. The most common one, of course, are injections. So these are the shots that we're most familiar with. There are also vaccines that are travel vaccines. So they may be in a pill format, liquid format. There are also nasal sprays. So they have different formulations, but they all do the same thing, which is one, to spark an immune response. So with that, there are different types of vaccines and they work differently. So we have our live attenuated vaccines. So most commonly the measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, which is our chickenpox, most commonly known as chickenpox vaccine. Those are live attenuated. And so basically what it does, it takes a weakened form of that germ, of the measles, mumps, rubella, of that germ, they weaken it and then form that into a vaccine. Now, inactivated vaccines take a killed version of the germ to make the vaccine. So very common are flu shots that everyone should be getting every season. A lot of them are inactivated vaccines. Then we start to drift off into things like subunit or recombinant polysaccharides. We're getting deep in the weeds now, but most commonly those are our pneumococcal vaccines that fight off pneumonia. You have toxoid vaccines, which takes a toxin, which is a harmful product. They kill it off, of course, so that it becomes a toxoid. and then they form that into a vaccine. So that's like your tetanus shot that you get once every 10 years when you're getting boosted. So then comes to our COVID-19 vaccines, right? So we have our messenger RNA vaccines and then the viral vector. So the viral vector vaccine is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And that one, basically both that and mRNA vaccines, what they're doing, they're teaching our cells, they're giving them instructions on how to make a protein that is found on the virus. So especially with the COVID-19 vaccine, they use what's called a spike protein. And so that's what the body is identifying. And so that's how it knows to then produce those antibodies to fight it off. So again, that's just a brief overview of the different type of vaccines. The main thing to know about them is that although they are different, they're all safe, they're all effective. And the main thing, again, is that they are all just teaching our bodies how to make or have those immune responses so that we can fight off the disease.
Thank you. So you said something that was really important. You said they're safe. So I want to bring Dr. Hancock into this conversation. We've heard the stories about people having these side effects from, the Johnson & Johnson, specifically COVID-19 vaccine. Does that happen to any vaccine, with anyone just getting it? Is that just something that's normal? So I want to toss it to you, Dr. Hancock.
Sure. So before we talk, first the answer to the question is yes, side effects are common with everything that we do, right? If you take Tylenol, you can have a side effect from it. If you take Benadryl, you might get sleepy. It's important for us to differentiate between side effects and adverse outcomes. Side effects are those minor annoyances that are associated with getting a vaccine or taking certain medications. And the way that we sort of outline side effects, everything gets on the list, right? If I take a Tylenol pill during the study and my eye twitches, that's going to be included in the insert that says possible side effects include, so that they don't show up on a lawyer commercial 5 years later. So when it comes to vaccines, any standard vaccine, the likelihood of having soreness around the injection site is to be common. A little bit of muscle ache is to be common. A little redness around the injection site is also normal. And then perhaps even a little bit of fever. When you go to the vaccine adverse event reporting system, this is the CDC system where healthcare professionals report out side effects and adverse outcomes. And adverse outcomes are those things that are really scary, like blood clots, Bell's palsy, where you're experiencing partial facial paralysis, severe allergic reaction, myocarditis, which is something that we heard quite a bit in the adolescent population with the COVID-19 vaccine. Those are adverse outcomes. So the vaccine adverse event reporting system is where we do all of our data dump. And if you go there right now, there are over 137,000 different adverse events experienced by children since having received the vaccine. Now, correlation, meaning the timing of something happening, does not equal causation, meaning I got the shot and my eye twitched. Now the shot causes eye twitching. No, you may have gotten nervous and you got that nervous twitch on your eye because you were getting a shot. And so we have to really differentiate those two things in order to have a clear understanding of what is to be expected with getting a vaccine and what is something that is out of the ordinary. And it isn't just that, it's also comparing that adverse outcome with the vaccine to that same adverse outcome with the actual infection. And a lot of people don't take that into consideration. They're like, oh, I heard you get myocarditis with that mRNA vaccine. Oh, you're gonna get them blood clots with Johnson & Johnson. What they should also ask is, what is the risk of blood clots with COVID? What is the risk of myocarditis with COVID? Right? What we found with the risk of myocarditis in the pediatric population, specifically, white adolescent boys were at highest risk for myocarditis across the board, whether it was by itself, just randomly with the vaccine or with COVID. And then in terms of ranking risk, the highest risk of myocarditis was with the actual infection itself. The highest risk of blood clots wasn't with Johnson & Johnson, but with actually getting COVID. And so whenever parents are asking the question, should I get my child vaccinated against fill in the blank disease? What do the adverse outcomes look like for this disease, right? But the meningococcal vaccine is a perfect example. I saw a 12-year-old today who needed it. And the parents were like, yeah, I don't know. And I said, well, let's talk it through. What does meningitis mean to you? Have you ever heard that before? And they were like, yeah, I think I saw a commercial on TV. What did you see? A girl lost her leg. She couldn't see and she couldn't walk, right? Let's go to VAERS. Do we see any of that reported out? We put in meningococcal. Do we see amputee? Any of those things? No. It's because a lot of times the disease itself, that's the whole purpose of getting the vaccine. We look at what's called morbidity, the complications from a disease or an infection, and mortality, death associated with the infection. If mortality and or morbidity are high, we need a shot for that. COVID-19 was the perfect example. We were losing people by the hundreds of thousands. We've now lost them by the millions. It was urgent that we had something to decrease the risk of complications and death. And so whenever people are thinking through, should I get my vaccine for X, Y, or Z? The first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the risk of what I'm worried about with this disease process? And to Dr. Walker's point, I love that she broke down the immune system, because one of the arguments I always get is that I'd rather my kid get sick with fill in the blank disease than inject this unsafe vaccine. And I'm like, well, have you heard about Haemophilus influenza? Have you had a family member with it? Do you know what it does to the body? Measles, mumps, and rubella. Like, do you want your child to be at risk for infertility because they got mumps at 5? Those are the things that we have to think through. And when it comes to safety, as I know we'll get into it, one of the biggest concerns is autism, right? Do vaccines cause autism? So back in the 90s, there was a former physician by the name of Andrew Wakefield who altered his study data. He tweaked his data. He lied, y'all. He lied about his results to prove his theory. He thought vaccines caused autism. He tweaked his data, and his study team did as well. Consequently, people took the horse, ran with it, right? Horse was out of the barn, vaccines cause autism. Now we're suing everybody. He lost his medical license because he lied about the data. They retracted the study, he lost his license, but the story was already out. We now have over 1 million children who have been studied to determine whether or not there's a relationship between vaccines and autism. And hands down, there has been no evidence-based link. Now you're gonna find Ray from around the way, who heard from Nancy, who heard from Tony, who heard from what's his name, Reagan's son, or no, Kennedy's son, Bobby Kennedy Jr., that vaccines do this, but there's no true scientific proof that they do. And a lot of the ingredients that people are concerned about are the same ingredients in your pots, right? So there are stabilizers that are used in vaccines to protect the integrity of the vaccine. Those same stabilizers are in that ice cream that you're in here eating while you're watching us, right? There are adjuvants, things that help to make the vaccine do what it does, like aluminum. And I hear that a lot. You get more aluminum frying that chicken than you do with the vaccine that you're getting, right? You don't ask questions about the Popeye's chicken sandwich that you get ready to eat, but you want to analyze critically the vaccine. What I would say, and not to belittle parents, but think through critically everything that you do for your children. What's in that Lunchable that you're about to pack up in 2 weeks? Think about those things when you're considering the concerns that you have when it comes to vaccine safety.
Wow, that part. Think about the Lunchable. Think about the food that you are ingesting. I love it. See, I told you guys, we have an esteemed panel. This is great. So with Dr. Walker and Dr. Hancock, you were both talking about the vaccines. So with the COVID-19 vaccine for children versus the COVID-19 vaccine for adults, it's the same thing, right? Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, but what's the difference?
So the main difference is just the amount of the antigen that's present in the vaccine itself. So you're going to have different formulations. So you have the newest one, which is some people like to call the toddler version. So that's for children under the age of 5. So they get 1 dose. The children 5 to 11 get another dose, and then adults. So it's not that they're using a different form of the antigen, just a different amount, because the body, depending on the age, is just going to have a different immune response. So you'll see a lower dosage that is used for the children versus the adults. That's why it's very important not to interchange them. So not just saying, oh, I'll just use the adult formulation, but a lower dose. You can't do that because it also has still more of that antigen. So that's the main difference, is just the amount of the antigen that's present in the vaccine itself varies based off of the age of the child. So they made sure to do studies to figure out what amount was age appropriate and then dose it from there. So again, it's important, age appropriate, not weight based, because you'll have some parents that will say, well, my child's a little bit bigger, so I want them to get the adult dose. I get that all the time. So it's very important to know they studied it based off of age, not weight. So if your child is 4, but they just, a little bit taller for a 4-year-old, leave them with that 4-year-old dose. Or, if they're going to be 5 in a week or 2, then they'll get that 5, that 5 dose. But it's very important to know they have studied it based off of age and came up with an appropriate dose as such. So it's very important to make sure that when you are taking your children or when you yourself are going to get vaccinated, making sure that you get the right dose based on the age.
One of the other differences that I think it's important to note is Moderna and Pfizer took a bit of a different approach. Pfizer dosed their vaccine based on what the minimum amount of vaccine was to trigger a strong response. Moderna, on the other hand, said, what's the strongest amount of vaccine we can give that's safe enough that will not facilitate side effects? It's one of the reasons why it took them a little bit longer for the FDA to provide emergency use authorization. The other difference is the frequency of dosing. We know that the 6-month to 4-year-old dose right now is a standard 3-part series for Pfizer. For Moderna right now, it is a 2-part series. We know that at some point in time, collectively, the COVID-19 dosing is likely going to be at least a 3-part series, given what we know about the importance of at least, clearly that first booster and then moving forward. So I want to make sure that parents know if it's either Moderna or Pfizer, if they end up with the Pfizer and there's an additional dose, they're not surprised.
Thank you. And I want to stay on the childhood immunizations, Dr. Hancock. So you talked about the causation and everything else. And that was, I remember hearing the story about, oh yeah, don't get your children immunized because, it causes autism. So talk to me, what if we have some mommies and daddies out there and they just happen to miss, maybe they miss one of the immunizations? Are they in trouble?
No, they're not. Parents are never in trouble unless they're like neglectful or abusive, right? Other than that, life happens, especially after COVID, right? I just saw a family of 4 where 3 of the 4 children were delayed in their immunizations because life happens, right? Dad serves in the military and they have 4 kids and we were in a pandemic. So it's a matter of catch up. Now, it's important for clinical staff people and schools to be aware of what that looks like, because between the ages of 6 months to 5 years, it's going to look different than older children. And I even had to catch myself. I had to print out the CDC charts. I put it up on my refrigerator so that we would be clear in who needed what. It really is almost like, remember those games of mix and match where it's like the old lady with the hat and you flip the cards to figure out where the other old lady with the hat is. It's almost that complicated, but you have to take your time. That's why it's important for parents to maintain vaccine records, because what ends up happening is if you can't find the records and the healthcare provider that you were seeing before is no longer there, or they're holding your records hostage because you got a bill overdue, which is illegal, by the way, then you don't have access to the records. And then we have to start you all over. So be very, as parents, I would ask, based on my child's age, what shots are now needed. As an example, for the patient who was 7, like she had 3 DTaps, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Now, pediatrician me was like, you supposed to have 5 DTaps. And then, so I'm like, she needs number 3, she needs number 4. But then I looked at the chart and I'm like, oh, wait, she's over 7. She doesn't need all these DTaps that she would have gotten if she was younger. All she needs is a Tdap because she's over 7. Should we high-five each other? Because I discovered that I was about to save her 2 shots. So take some time to get your records, mommies and daddies, grandmommies, granddaddies. Healthcare providers, take your time to analyze the shot records. I know it's August. So August in pediatrics is like December in retail, right? Take the time to review those charts. Don't pretend like you'll end up either inflicting more pain than is necessary, or you'll end up missing out on some shots. And Mr. Parker will have to come and find you.
That is true. And speaking of Mr. Parker, I want to bring you into this conversation as well. I want to talk about the disparities in the vaccination rates, and there's so much misinformation that's out there. So, Mr. Parker, with everything that you're doing with the Ward 5 State Board of Education, how can we debunk the misinformation that's surrounding childhood vaccines and also the COVID-19 vaccines?
There are many misconceptions. I would also acknowledge that where the district is and the region is now is very different than we were at the beginning of this pandemic when we were trying to figure it out. At that time, there were significant racial disparities in who had access to information, who had access to testing, and who had access to vaccines. Now in the district, we're close to 80% of the population being vaccinated. And in fact, if you look at some of the data by race, you'll be surprised to see that Black children are actually receiving the vaccination at a higher rate than white children. And there's a question we're trying to figure out, like, what's going on there. That shifts as students get older. So in the teen years, we're seeing more white students get vaccinated and Black students not so much. But we also know that there is a divide for those that lack information or access, usually along socioeconomic lines. And so there is still a barrier. And that's why the district has recently launched mobile health clinics and pop-up clinics, trying to make it as easy as possible. And so when I was hearing Dr. Hancock talk about the records, that's one of the things that popped in my head. If I walk up to a mobile health clinic, I'm likely not going to have those records. And so it is really informative to educate parents to say, these are the things that you should know. Administer vaccines based on a kid's age, as well as try to collect as much information as possible. I also didn't know it was illegal to withhold medical records. So that is good to know as well. But the headline I would say is we are somewhere between 20 and 25% of students still needing to get vaccinated before the beginning of school. And so I'm assuring the doctors here are seeing influx of parents coming in right before the school year. That is normal, I would imagine. And so we're hoping that we can get that number down significantly in the next few weeks. But we believe, for all the reasons that were already discussed, it is safer to have fully immunized students in school versus those that are not. So we don't have these rolling blackouts, if you will, where students had to close down classrooms and or miss school weeks at a time because of infections and spread.
Thank you. So I want to stay on this. And this is for all the panelists. What resources are available to families who want to have their children vaccinated? Because you talked about access and barriers. So where can they go? What resources are out there? I'll start with you, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, so for those that are in the district, you can visit coronavirus.dc.gov. You can also visit, I believe it is noshotsnoschool.dc.gov, that will give you a list of the shots that your school-age child needs, as well as where you can take advantage of pop-up mobile clinics. Those clinics are free. You do have to sign up. There are schools throughout the district that have pop-up clinics where we are trying to eliminate the barriers that we know exist. But even still, it's more about information. So I would just say, for the parents that may tune in or watch this, if you have children in your neighborhood or that play with your children, it may be worth encouraging them or asking them, hey, did you know this policy exists where your children may not be able to stay in school if they're not vaccinated? Because again, a lot of this comes down to information. Last thing I would say, which is really concerning, and maybe the doctors can speak to this, there are numbers of parents, namely Black and brown parents, that are choosing to homeschool their children for fear of the vaccine. They have taken heed to this note that no shots, no school, fine, I'll take my kid out of school. And for the education side of things, we have grave concerns about that. Homeschooling is great for those who can pull it off and really commit to it and do it well. But we also know that that requires time, dedication, resources, et cetera. And so what might we on the education side used to educate parents who may be using that as a last resort, since they don't feel as though they can keep their kids at school.
Thank you. Dr. Hancock, what resources are out there?
The first, and I'm sure Dr. Walker can talk about it more because I actually tapped into this resource today since we didn't have this vaccine in stock, is your local pharmacy. I don't think families know as much as they should that children over the age of 3 can actually go to their local pharmacy to get their shots. Some of them you have to do at like their minute clinics and things like that, and others you can do at their freestanding pharmacies. Here in Prince George's County, there are a variety of school-based vaccine opportunities. If you go to pgcps.org, there is a link for you to tap into to know where those schools are. Our health department has also done an amazing job of creating space for families to be able to come in and get vaccinated. And this is for families where economics are a challenge, particularly in the health department. At the school-based sites, regardless of your insurance status, you can get vaccines. We have federally qualified health systems, both in DC, Unity being like the biggest and brightest because they're so incredible, an amazing partner. Here in Prince George's County, we have Greater Baden that provides sliding scale services. And clearly, if you're tapped into having a healthcare provider, going to see your pediatrician, your MP, your PA, not waiting to the last minute. I know it gets frustrating when you call and you're trying to get in. What I would say, clearly hindsight is 2020, but what I started to do early on is send out notices to my families, like get in where you fit in, because come August, and it's my birthday month, I don't work the whole month of August down to the wire. I take off, like I'm off for a whole week after Wednesday. So come on, let's do this. And so the majority of my students, like they already have their health certificates. I'm up to date. Like we had a 3 to 5 business day turnaround. I'm getting school certificates back in 2 days. We had a power outage last week. I put my adapter in my car and sat in the dark with my laptop to get these school health certificates out, because it's a very stressful time for everybody, inclusive of the school system. And we don't want to not be fair to them. We don't want a huge data dump for them as well while they're trying to teach our children. To Mr. Parker's question about families opting to homeschool their children, one of the things that is different this year than it has ever been in the time that I've practiced pediatrics is the level of distrust of the CDC specifically. And I will be honest and transparent with you. I don't trust the CDC as much as I used to, right? They just changed the COVID-19 isolation and testing recommendations. It's been a roller coaster. And so for us in healthcare, feeling like we're on this tilt-a-wheel, I can only imagine what lay public feels, and they don't have the same public health and health literacy that we do. So I've had more families decline vaccinations than I ever have. And I worked in Los Angeles, which was probably the birthplace of the anti-vax movement. And so it's not that families are anti-vax, they're distrustful. And rightfully so. The CDC said, don't wear a mask. And they said, put a t-shirt over your face. And then they said, wear any old mask you can get. And then now they're like, well, wear an N95, but not really. Like you can be out even though you're exposed and still do your thing. So I get it. We have to, as Black healthcare professionals, brown healthcare professionals, be at the forefront communicating, acknowledging the distrust, but then addressing it. Being transparent, my daughter's fully vaccinated. What was the process that I went through? I have one child and I will go through hell and back for her. There's nothing I wouldn't do for her. And I certainly would not have her injected with anything that was unsafe. And the same thing for myself. So really being open and honest about my own decision-making process and talking respectfully among families. And if they still decide not to vaccinate their children, because I have highly educated individuals with buku money, way more than I do, who've chosen not to vaccinate their children, and they don't have the capacity to teach, either because of skill set or time. It's making sure in the space of their decision, providing them with the resources that even in the face of them choosing not to vaccinate their children, that the educational gap does not further widen for Black and brown children. And I think that just adds additional responsibility to the school system. But if you're going to put that mandate forward, you also have to be prepared in how you're going to support families who, no matter what, still decide to keep their children home.
That was great. That was great. Thank you, Dr. Hancock. Dr. Walker, do you want to add on to what she stated?
I definitely agree with both Mr. Parker as well as Dr. Hancock. They wrapped it up very nicely as far as all the resources. I will also say a great resource that I found to be very useful because it's like your one-stop shop is OSSI. So OSSI's website is an amazing tool because it literally has everything specific because you're DC residents, right? So it has everything specific to DC that all the parents would need. So it's actually OSSI, so OSSE.dc.gov. And they have a link on there that's no shots, no school. And it has everything that they need, all the forms that they'll need, all the questions that they may have. Literally, it's like your one-stop shop. I thought it was they did a very great job of making it very simplistic so parents aren't going here, there, everywhere trying to find all the information that they need. So I highly recommend all parents, caregivers, make sure that you utilize that tool for sure. And then to piggyback on what Dr. Hancock said, utilize your pharmacies. We are here. The pharmacists are here to answer questions. Most pharmacies are stocking pretty much all of the vaccines that are going to be needed for children for school age so that they can make sure that they're up to date. So make sure to come in and see us. We're accessible. Some pharmacies can accommodate you without an appointment. Others, if you don't want to have to wait, have a platform for you to make an appointment. And also it's great because you can ask the pharmacist questions. You can ask us. We're here to answer those questions, to educate and to help parents to make sure that their children are up to date and making sure that they're getting the right vaccine based off, as Dr. Hancock said, the age. We're not just trying to load you up with vaccines just to load you up. So it's really important that you have somebody that's accessible, that you don't have to make an appointment to see, but that we also have the vaccine there. Also, putting this out there, like I said, for pharmacies right now, it is 3 and up. However, Grubbs Pharmacy, which is an independent pharmacy in DC, near and dear to my heart, they actually can vaccinate as young as 6 months because they do have a relationship with a pediatrician, Dr. Lang, in the district. So it's an amazing resource as well. So if you do have those younger children that can't get in there, of course, you do have to have a prescription for that age, but Grubbs does carry all of those vaccines for the little babies too. So again, if you're not able to make it to the pediatrician, your pediatrician can write a prescription, you can definitely go to Grubbs Pharmacy. So shout out to Dr. Kim, all the great work that they are doing on that independent level to make sure that our residents, especially our babies, are getting vaccinated. So utilize OSSI, utilize pharmacists, utilize all of these tools, ask questions. We are here.
Thank you. And so, I was about to say Dr. Parker. Mr. Parker, can you
speak it into existence?
Yes, it is. So can you talk about the Ward 5 Education Equity Committee's backpack giveaway? Because that's a way for residents to get vaccinated as well.
Absolutely. So the Ward 5 Education Equity Committee is a nonprofit comprised of educators, parents, education advocates that are wanting to support our students as they head back to school at the end of this month. This Saturday, between 10 and 12, we will be gathering for our 3rd annual back to school giveaway event where students can receive a backpack filled with school supplies. There'll be games and food and music, everything that every child of every age can enjoy. And so there'll be something for everyone, but we will also have on staff DC Health, who will be on site administering vaccines, or COVID vaccines, just to specify. And we will be located at Burroughs Elementary School, and that is August 20th, again, between 10 and 12. And the address there is 1820 Monroe Street Northeast. So this Saturday between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., come out, get a backpack, get some food, play games, enjoy, but also make sure your students have free vaccines as they get ready for the school year.
Thank you. And thank you to Dr. Walker, who will be one of the vaccinators. She's bringing the COVID-19 vaccines, and also to the Rodham Institute, which has been on board with this. So please come on out this Saturday and make sure that you're vaccinated. So we talked about—
That's a quick question, not to mess up the flow, but Dr. Walker, you said something. I just wanted to check my own understanding. So if a parent were to go to a pharmacy, it's only for students 3 and up. But there is this one pharmacy, and as you said it, I actually Googled it, Grubbs Pharmacy. And so a doctor will will specify that a child under 3 needs the vaccine. So can you just explain why some pharmacies may not administer that vaccine while maybe this one would?
Absolutely. So the reason why pharmacies have now, well, I guess I could say across the country, can vaccinate 3 and up is because of the pandemic. So before that, a lot of pharmacists were not able to vaccinate children at a certain age. So depending on which pharmacy you went to, if you went to Walgreens, they may say, hey, we can vaccinate children 12 and up. You might go to CVS and they say, we're only going to vaccinate children 15 and up. So it was more so the corporation itself can decide what age they wanted to vaccinate children. Now, what the pandemic opened up was saying, hey, pharmacists, they're able to do this. We need to be able to get access to these children. Okay, let's lower this age down to 3. So that made it blanket. Now, the great thing about Grubbs, because they're an independent pharmacy, what we did, we partnered. This was actually pre-pandemic. And I can say this because I worked at Grubbs during this time. So my job as an immunization clinical coordinator at that time was to build our vaccination services and figure out how can we vaccinate children under this age limit that we had. How can we be more of service to the community? So what that looked like is that we formed a partnership with a pediatrician in the district. So it was kind of like a collaborative practice agreement. So we had a protocol that stated, hey, if a patient comes in with a prescription from a doctor that they have a relationship with, and that physician is comfortable, obviously sending us to the pharmacy, we can vaccinate them pursuant to having a prescription. So that allowed a lot of flexibility, especially for Dr. Lang and her team. And then we had some other physicians jump on board too, that said, hey, that frees up some time for me and my team so that they can kind of push that off to get it vaccinated at the pharmacy level. So Grubbs is a little bit different because they had that worked into their actual protocol to be able to do this. So when COVID hit, we were already in the groove of, okay, we're comfortable with doing this. Now, other pharmacies, to my knowledge, from what I know, are sticking with just 3 and up, but Grubbs is definitely still vaccinating under that age of 3, as long as they have a prescription. So that's what makes it a little bit different. 3 and up, they don't have to have the prescription, but under the age of 3, Grubbs is available to do that. So again, parents, if you're in the district, if you have a prescription, feel free to stop at Grubbs.
Super. And last clarifying question, that's 320 East Capitol Street, Northeast.
That's it. Yeah. So the flagship store, there is more than one location. Thank you for saying that. So this is the location, the flagship store, which is in Capitol Hill.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have some questions in the Q&A box, so I wanted to get to that. So Judy, she says, please address boosters. Dr. Hancock, Dr. Walker.
So for right now, for those under the age of 50, the first booster is indicated. For those 50 and older who have 50 to 64 who have some form of chronic disease, which the majority of us do, and those who are 65 and older, a second booster is indicated. Why do we need a booster, right? Like, yeah, I got my 2 shots. Y'all trying to get, like, this is all Bill Gates microchips. Y'all trying to chip me because it didn't work the first time. The reason that we need boosters is exactly what Dr. Walker talked about. Our immune system has 2 components. There's our circulating antibodies. They're always on the hunt. They're always on the prowl looking for foreign invasion, right? So they're like they're like the soldiers sitting out in front. That's what we want to have in place to decrease the risk of even getting infected once you are exposed to COVID, right? And then we have those other bigger, stronger soldiers that she talked about, our B cells and our T cells. Those remember, they're like elephants, they never forget. So they will always show up. You'll get infected, but then they show up to fight off the infection. The beauty of being boosted, depending on the variant, is that it could either prevent you from getting an infection because it boosts your circulating antibodies, or if it's tricky like BA.5 and BA.2.75 that can escape or evade the immune response, then what a booster does is allows your body to have a stronger, longer immune response in order to decrease the severity of symptoms of COVID and decrease the risk of death. which were the two main goals for the vaccine in the first place. The vaccine preliminarily was not designed to prevent us from getting COVID, but to prevent us from getting significantly ill, hospitalized, and or dying. And so that's one of the things people have to really appreciate and digest and let marinate in your spirit. Because if you don't, then you'll always question, well, you got sick and you got the booster and the booster. Well, but I'm here, right? And I got barely a cough and a sneeze compared to other people that we know who unfortunately were not vaccinated and ended up succumbing to COVID, even with these gentler, milder versions of COVID. Right now, there's sort of a pause. We were going to be, for those of us under the age of 50, I can still fit into that category until next year. Whoop, whoop. For those of us under 50, the FDA had thought to make a second booster available to us as well. But then they were like, hold up, wait a minute. We heard y'all got this bivalent situation, which has both what I call OG COVID, the original COVID-19, and then this Omicron component, given that we're dealing more with Omicron than we were when the vaccine first came out. So this has a combination, and Moderna and Pfizer said we might be able to get this out by September. The FDA said, okay, for those of you under 50, hold on, wait a minute, let us put some Omicron in it. And that's what we'll likely have available for all of us collectively as a booster come September.
Wow, thank you, thank you. So we have another question. Can you share more about the HPV vaccine? Dr. Walker?
You want to take that one, Dr. Walker?
I'll let you handle that one.
Okay.
It's a little deep, so I'm a little long-winded when I talk about HPV.
HPV itself, the human papilloma virus, is the most common STD, sexually transmitted disease or infection. Over 85% of us, by the time we are adults in this country, will have had some form of HPV infection. The majority of us clear that infection on our own. You may not know that you have it unless on a pap smear. Ladies go get their little annual checkup where it is noted that you have it present because we test for it. HPV can be linked to warts. It can show up on your face, your hands, your fingers, your toes, or in your private area. And because it can cause so much inflammation and irritation, the warts themselves and the turnover of cells, it is linked to cervical cancer, anal cancer, penile cancer, and in Michael Douglas's case, throat cancer. I ain't gonna ask no questions. What the vaccine has been able to do is to reduce the risk of those diseases, warts, and all those cancers by 88% since the vaccine was put out on the market. When it was first put out on the market, there were all kinds of questions, concerns, the same conversations we had about COVID, the vaccine causing infertility, the vaccine being created to sterilize Black people. I heard this about the HPV vaccine in the same way that I've now heard it about the COVID-19 vaccine way back over 10 years ago when it first came out. There have been specific studies looking at the link between the HPV vaccine and higher rates of infertility because, again, correlation does not equal causation. What I will tell you is that the foods that we put in our bodies, the lotions we put on our skin, the chemicals that we do or do not put in our hair have a stronger link to infertility and all the other things that we're dealing with. There have not been significant scientific studies, evidence-based medicine and studies, again, that show a link between HPV and infertility. And one of the things that I always bring up with families is if some of these vaccines were designed to sterilize certain communities, how do healthcare professionals know? Like, is there a black batch that comes out of Pfizer that we know is the black batch? And it's like, if we have some white patients, somehow they're going to suffer the same consequences. Like, there's no way logistically from a chain response in terms of from the time the vaccine is created until it gets into a healthcare provider or a pharmacy's office, would we have a vaccine that somehow specifically targeted a certain population? We would, I wouldn't sign up for it. And I know people like, oh, you drink Kool-Aid because you're a doctor. I don't drink that much Kool-Aid. I'm over here doing Reiki and being a doula and practicing yoga while I write a prescription. So I'm fully vetted in terms of what the FDA and the CDC can potentially be capable of. But there are certain things that I know are just absurd. And one of those being that the HPV vaccine is linked specifically to causing sterilization of our community. And I
Wow.
might mention, it's a 3-part series. We start young. So that's the other thing that parents are concerned about. Why do you start so young? You telling me my 11-year-olds out here doing some things? Well, one, yes, some 11-year-olds are out here doing some things, but we try to catch them before they're doing some things so that they're protected. You want to prevent them from being at risk for cervical cancer, warts, and all those things. And so we package it with their standard 11 to 12-year-old vaccines. Meningococcal, there are the tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis shot, and then HPV. We all do that around the 12-year-old visit. And then the HPV vaccine is a series of 3 shots.
Thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying, because there are 11-year-olds, like you said, out there doing lots of things. So thank you so much. We're not done yet, almost. So, Mr. Parker, just educator to educator, they have the no shots, no school, right? And you talked about that. And I believe all of the panelists, you alluded to the increasing, I don't like saying achievement gaps, because, there isn't a such thing as more like an education debt, because first of all, Black and Brown people were not allowed to participate in our education system. And then when we were free, it was told, okay, just go ahead, go. So, I mean, how do you expect for me to take care of myself if I wasn't allowed to participate in that system anyway? And now you're blaming me for being behind. So I say education debt. So as folks are being further denied their education. I think it's still, you're being denied your education by saying, hey, no shot, no school. Let's figure something out. What can we do, like the Rodham Institute? I'm sure there are some of your students who want to be a pharmacist like Dr. Walker. They want to be a pediatrician like Dr. Hancock. What can we do to work with those educators, their parents, and the students to make sure that they don't fall further behind?
No, I really appreciate that. It is worth noting the State Board of Education in DC called for the city to strengthen our virtual instruction models years ago, because we looked down the road and could see that there might be a challenge with students sitting in a classroom. And unfortunately, we're not there yet, but there's still hope that we can get there. What we can all do, I think, as much as you can support tutoring, out of school time programming, and or making sure those students in your unit, whether that's in your family, in your community, are supported, that you're making sure that they're reading, they're getting sufficient time out of the classroom, still engaged in learning activities, is the most important thing. One thing I would say is there are a number of online resources. If parents are taking their students out of school, the biggest thing to focus on, if I had one recommendation, is grade level instruction. And so if your student is supposed to be in 6th grade, that student should be reading 6th grade text and working on 6th grade math problems and engaging in 6th grade problem sets. And that is the barrier that we're facing inside of the classroom. And I fear that parents will fall victim to, because no one wants to see a child struggle, but it is through that struggle and the support that we will make sure that our students are performing on grade level. So I would say, as much as you can support a local tutoring group, I'm happy to connect you all and do some professional day role models, bringing you all into schools to talk to classrooms, because part of it, as you know, our young people need to see mirrors and they need to see what is possible. And many of our young people have never met a pharmacist or a doctor, and certainly haven't met one that looked like them. And so again, I'm happy to set that up if you're interested.
Thank you.
Ms.
Exposure.
Parker, can I ask one quick question?
Yes, please.
How are you guys, Mr. Parker, tracking the progress of these children? Like, I'm very much a data nerd. So how are you, one, tracking these children in terms of their progress? And two, how are you still allowing them to engage, stay connected to the school body for those whose parents are like, no, we're not doing shop?
That is a great question. And the brutal truth is we aren't. This is, once in a lifetime pandemic experience that and I think we're facing issues as they come. And so what is on the horizon is both a teacher retention crisis, where a quarter of our teachers are leaving the classroom every year. And that's not just a DC problem, it's a nationwide problem. In fact, I saw the Secretary of Education talking about it on the news this morning. But we also have more parents that are feeling as though it's safer for their kids to be at home versus learning in school for a host of reasons. The virus being one, gun violence being another, rampant bullying another. And so, to be honest, we haven't figured out a way to track it, which is why we're trying to do as much as possible to ensure that as many students can stay in school, because that is the best place for them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And so at GW, I am going to plug our dual enrollment programs. That's something that we have. I also lead the Health Education and Leadership Program, which was actually started by Miss Tracy Bass, my colleague at the Rodham Institute. So we expose our young high school students to professions in the healthcare industry, but they don't have to go into healthcare. You know, we like them to, but we understand that they don't. We provide free SAT prep. So math, one of our teachers is a master's student in engineering from UDC. We have SAT prep for English and writing. So, and I'm a nerd too, so I do collect data from our help program, and I can tell you our scholars are doing amazing. So we're moving on to phase 2, which is now working with the scholars as they're in their college program. So, you know, working with the first year college students. So this is great, you guys. I mean, we have a minute and I'm just like, this is amazing. Thank you so much. Please don't, panelists don't leave, because I want to take a picture so we can post it up. But thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to take the time to ask you, just give us some last words, starting with you, Dr. Walker. Give us some last words.
Absolutely. So again, I applaud everybody that signed on tonight to even listen to this conversation, to be a part of this conversation. It lets us know that you take it serious and that you're really engaged in making sure that you're making the best decision for your children. So I applaud you all for having this conversation with us. I just want to continue to encourage everybody to just ask the questions, get the information from people who are going to give you valid information or valid responses to your questions. Making sure that it's backed by science and backed by facts and not by feelings, so that you're able to make those informed decisions. So make sure to tap into those healthcare professionals that you do trust and that you know are not going to lead you astray. From parent to parent, I understand that we always want to do what's best for our children. And so the best thing that we can do for them is getting them vaccinated. It is no point in exposing our children to diseases and illnesses that they don't have to be afflicted with or have those complications from, when we can do our part and be proactive to get them vaccinated. So again, I applaud you for taking the first step to just being involved in this conversation. Continue to look at the resources, everything that we've shared, look into it for yourself, and just make sure that you do what's best for your babies. I hope they have an amazing school year, and just know that we are rooting for them, and we are excited to see the new pharmacists and doctors and educators that are to come from your beautiful babies. So I love you all. Thank you all so much for joining. It's indeed been my pleasure to be with you all this evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Stay on. All right. Mr. Parker, last words?
Trust the science. I'll keep it short.
Yes, trust the science, not Uncle Bob's Facebook page. All right, Dr. Hancock.
What I would say is be honest with yourself as a parent. For those of you who are considering keeping your children out of school, be honest with yourself in terms of your capacity for patience to teach your child, your capacity in terms of your own intellect and being able to understand the grade level that your child is at. Do you have the ability to teach this newfangled math? Like, how were you in spelling? How were you as a student? Do not do your child the disservice of keeping them home out of fear. Vaccines have been around since the 1700s with the first smallpox vaccine. Your mama, your mama's mama, and the folks behind them received these same vaccines. And here we are walking upright and conjugating verbs. Do what's right for your babies. Make a decision based on who you want them to be 10 to 20 years from now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And once again, on behalf of Dr. Gigi El-Bayoumi, the founder of the Rodham Institute, and on behalf of the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences, thank you so much for joining us, and take care, everybody.